Every year in Wisconsin, more than 600 people are killed and another 1,000 are wounded by gunfire. Gun deaths are disproportionately on the increase in this state.
One bullet. One bullet is all it takes to take a life. For these sisters, this has hit home more than once, both of them losing a child to gun violence.
I never thought this would happen in my family. I thought the first tragedy with my sister's daughter, I thought that was it. Nobody else was never entered our mind that somebody in the family was going to be shot and killed, especially one of my children. And it happens.
Say hi, Rita. Say like.
Rita passed away when she was 11 in March 2000 when she was at my grandma's house. Rita was one of the hundreds lost to gun violence each year. According to the Gun Violence Archive, more than 40,000 people were killed by guns in 2023.
She was at my mom's, her grandma, and I guess she was at my mom's room watching cartoons, and there was a shooting outside, bunch of guys out there, and they all just started shooting, and one of the bullets entered the wall and struck Rita on the back of the head, and my mom was in the front room when she heard all the gunshots. She got on the floor and crawled right away towards Rita and was telling Rita, "Rita, get up, come on, we gotta go." And when she picked Rita up, she said she saw all that blood coming out the back of her head.
You know, I was 5. I was 5 when my sister was shot and killed. And, you know, you wouldn't expect a child to remember, you know, that young, but I feel like with tragedies and things that are very huge in your life, you remember. So I remember seeing my mom drop the phone, because back then they had phones, and I remember seeing her go to the gas station and being on the phone and then dropping it and running to the car. I remember the feelings of when my sister was shot and killed and when my cousins were shot and killed. And it's a very heavy feeling.
There's never any oncoming cars that would have hit us. And we got to my mom's and all the paramedics, ambulance, police was there. And all I could yell, because they wouldn't let me in the bedroom, was, "Rita, Mama loves you." And they pulled me out. They wouldn't let me go in there and touch her. She was innocent. She was 11. She still played with Barbie dolls. She loved dolls. And she was my Rita Bell.
Rita's birthday was a day before mine, and we would celebrate it together. And now that she's no longer here, I'm left to imagine what life would have been like if she were. And I wonder, would have we had like birthday traditions, and you know, would we have a special day for just us? So with my sister passing and, you know, with my cousins passing and getting shot, when you're a little kid, you don't realize that it's going to impact you until you get older and you realize, oh, you know, this is why I'm the way I am. So when I was younger and I learned how to write, a lot of the times with my mom and my family, the one line was, I didn't get to say goodbye. So when I was younger, I would write like prompts of like, "Mom, I knew that it was my time," because I had a fear that I was gonna pass away. Like it was my time next. Like I was gonna be shot and killed next. Reyes was shot July 4th. We don't know why or who did it, just that he was walking home.
We didn't get no calls from the hospital or anything until the next day. And I was in the kitchen, all of a sudden somebody said hello in the front, and I peeked like there was a cop, but they came in and they told me, they didn't say what's your son's name? They said, did you have a son? So that right there, you know, you just think, is he gone, or why do they say it that way? And they told me that they had shot and killed him.
From birthdays to holidays, these families are now left to mourn the days that were once celebrated.
So every 4th of July is when he was killed. Just every time you see them throwing up the fireworks, I think of him, and it'll be a memory forever with that month, that holiday. Everything changed then. My life and his sister's life.
We are here with Brenda Hines, who is using her son's story to put a face on gun violence awareness. Brenda lost her son Donovan to gun violence here in Milwaukee. Through her grief, Brenda joined Moms Demand Action. She endeavors for her work to motivate community members to take a stand and advocate for victims of gun violence injuries and deaths. Brenda, thank you for joining our discussion today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Tell us about Donovan. How old was he when he passed?
23 years old.
All right.
Just starting life. He was a very vibrant person, always happy, always smiling and protecting his mother. So, very loving.
All right. And what happened that night to change everything for you?
We had supper, and then after that he left out about 8 o'clock, and by 11 o'clock I had gotten a call that something was wrong. And then by 12, they had said that my son had been shot. But I was thinking maybe he was still alive. So I called the hospitals and the police stations and everything else, and they said, hold on, Ms. Hines, we'll get back with you. And it wasn't until about 3 o'clock in the morning the detective came out and showed me a picture.
All right. And what exactly happened to Donovan that night?
He was driving from the gas station on 27th and Hampton over to 29th Street and was shot up in the car.
All right. And I know you had a different role in our community. What were you doing that night when you heard the news?
Well, I was about 2 years prior to Donovan's death. I was a chaplain and for the 7th District Police Department in the Salvation Army, and I helped other families in times of homicides and crisis.
Right. And
then I became a victim of crisis.
Right, so you'd been through many families experiencing the same grief. What were you thinking at that time when now here you were in need of ministering, in need of services, afflicted by the same violence that you'd have helped other families with?
Well, I always say I always got up to the yellow tape with the other families, and I would say everything was going to be all right. But when it came my time to get up to the yellow tape, it hasn't been all right ever since. So they say the new normal, but it's really hard, very difficult.
Right, and the new normal is something that you discuss in your book that you wrote. What led you to write the book?
Well, they always laugh at me about the title, The Heart That Never Heals. And actually, my heart will never heal. I would just have to learn how to deal with it. But I've written the book because my son's story is still unsolved, and that I'm hoping that that book outlives that, so maybe his case could get solved.
Right, and in your book, as well as discussing the new normal and trying to find the new normal, you also discover the role of faith, the faith you had before and the faith you have going forward, and you share that faith with other people who might be affected the same way. Tell us about the work that faith does in one's life, trying to overcome this tragedy.
That was a tough walk for me, because when I went out as a chaplain with the police and everyone, I had bargained with God, and I said, well, if I go out, then he was obligated to take care of my children. But it didn't happen, so I felt let down. So I lost faith for about 6 months. I had tossed the Bible away, and I didn't want to talk to God. And I understand how people can get to that point and stage and blame him or whatever. But then finally I remembered my son going out with me and how he would smile. Every time I got ready to go out for a homicide, I would put on a red vest, and he would say, "Moms, you really think that red vest is bulletproof?" and have a big smile on his face. So then I began to go back out to help other families again.
Right. And this led into your work with Moms Demand Action. Tell us about that work.
Well, Moms Demand Action actually, about 3 weeks, maybe a month after I lost Donovan, I was a wreck, and they called me in for brunch, and I was with Miss Hamilton, Dante Hamilton mom, and a few other mothers that gave me a little strength to push on, and I'm very grateful for Moms Demand Action for that, for inviting me in with other strong mothers to know that I can make it in the families.
All right. When you work with other families who've experienced the same tragedy, what do they say to you? Do they feel that what you say is helpful?
Well, they can relate. They know I can definitely relate to what they're going through. No story is the same. I've been doing this now for about 6 years. I have not heard one story that's the exact same as mine. So everyone's story from gun violence is always different.
Right.
That's amazing to me.
As our viewers sit out there and watch this, and maybe they've experienced the same tragedy, what are some advice you might give for where to start with recovery, where to start with forgiveness?
Well, you first have to start within. Seek help. Don't go it alone, because you're definitely not alone. It's a lot of help that's out here. And forgiveness, that was a very big hard part for me, because I don't know who to forgive. I don't know who, what, why. They shot my son's car up that night, and it's been 7 years now. But I'm at a point of peace and forgiveness. And even if they did find someone now, I can definitely say I could have forgiveness.
Right. And I know you have other children. How do you keep Donovan's memory alive when you're all together?
Well, we do still celebrate his birthday. I celebrate a lot of community events, like we done the gun violence memorial vigil at the end of the year. Every end of the year, I make sure I honor every gun violence victim with a vigil and a candlelight. So that's not only healing for me, but it also helped the other families.
Right. And some final thoughts as far as the future. What can we do as a society, as a state, as a city to prevent this from happening again?
Well, that's the big question we're all asking. What can we do to prevent this? It seems to be happening quite a lot in our community. Just be supportive. That's the only thing I can say, because I don't see it stopping. This year alone, we started out with more numbers than last year. But the people need support and help. And doing like you're doing now, letting us tell our story.
All right. Well, Ms. Brenda, again, we're sorry to hear about your loss, and we support you in your work with other families. We want to thank you again for being here and sharing Donovan's story with us.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. With the amount of gun-related deaths in Wisconsin, we're left as a community to wonder, what can we do? Will there ever be a change, or are we left facing the harsh realities of this epidemic that shatters the peace in our communities?
There are lots of organizations here in Milwaukee that try to get people involved to advocate for stricter gun laws. One of those organizations is Moms Demand Action. Jennifer Hoffman Jonas of Moms Demand Action sits down to talk about why she joined the cause and what she hopes to see in the future.
At Moms Demand Action, I am a co-lead of our local Milwaukee group. The changes that I'm really hoping to see are in common sense gun legislation, especially in Wisconsin. With changing the maps, it might help us pass more common sense gun legislation. We would really like to have background checks in Wisconsin and extreme risk protection orders, as well as disarming domestic abusers.
For many people, fighting for safer streets and stricter gun laws seem impossible. But Jennifer advises we continue to fight and, in time, create change.
I would say to people that feel really discouraged in the moment with the rise of gun violence and a seemingly uphill battle, to not give up, to keep going. It's what we say in our movement, is that we're all going to keep going, and if we meet a challenge, we don't stop. It is going to take all of us, and your voice is important, and please don't forget that.
We're here with Nicholas Mataszewski of the WAVE Fund, an organization here in Milwaukee that is advocating for change in our state. Nicholas, as well, thank you for joining our discussion.
Thanks for having me.
All right, explain, what is the WAVE Fund?
Sure. So WAVE is Wisconsin's oldest and largest gun violence prevention organization. We've been around since the early to mid 1990s, and we have 70,000 more or so supporters across the state. We have supporters in every single district. And we are an organization that uses education and advocacy to push for better gun laws and try to push our legislature and other policymakers to make the changes we need in the state to be free of gun violence.
All right, and at the grassroots level, where is WAVE most visible? At the Capitol building in Madison, or at community events? How does WAVE interact with the community?
We try to have a mixture, so we definitely do have some community events, mostly in the Milwaukee area, some in Madison, but we are a statewide organization, so we'll often have events, in the northern part of the state as well. But all of that is to influence policy, so it's also very important for us to have lobby days and other events at the Capitol in Madison. So we try to bring as many of our supporters as possible to meet with their legislators to push for these sensible gun legislation.
Of course. Are there pieces of legislation over the years that were passed, or anything that WAVE was behind or supported?
So WAVE has a history of, throughout decades of pushing for policies that some have been passed. Unfortunately, with how our state legislature is made up currently, a lot of the elected officials are under the thumb of the gun lobby. So while we've done a really good job of building up our base in the state and putting an infrastructure in place, it's really important that folks get out and vote for candidates that will support common sense gun legislation. Because at this point, Wisconsin is lacking of most major policies that we know would be effective to reduce gun violence. We are a state that has around 700 deaths from gun violence every year. A good portion of those are suicides, but a lot are also community violence related. And we know the policies that would work, and we just need to make sure that our policymakers are making decisions to protect the citizens of Wisconsin.
Right. What are some laws that Wisconsin should pass or should strengthen to solve the problem? You also mentioned the problem with gun violence relating to self-inflicted injuries. What laws can be put in place or improved to improve the problem overall?
Yeah, there are a whole lot of laws that we've been pushing for. Just to name a few, universal background checks. This is a policy that's widely supported by well over 80% of Wisconsinites and over 90% of Americans at large. This would ensure that every gun sale, whether it is from a federally licensed gun dealer or if it's from somebody down the street who isn't registered, but they want to get rid of their gun, they want to sell their gun. Every gun transfer would have to go through a background check, and this is a way to ensure that guns are being, sold to the right folks and are in the right hands and not in the hands of anybody that would want to do themselves or others harm. So that's one policy we're pushing for. It was introduced this year. It was not bipartisan, which is to say that we had Democrats supporting the bill, but no Republicans supporting the bill. Some of the other policies we're pushing for would be an extreme risk law, also known as a red flag law. And that is a policy that would allow for law enforcement, family, potentially healthcare officials, and a select few others to go to the courts to enact a civil process to have the firearms removed from an individual who is a harm to themselves or others. We're also promoting safe storage policies that require citizens to store their firearms properly, and if they're not stored properly, they could face either fines or imprisonment if those firearms are then used to carry out a tragedy. We're pushing for other suicide prevention policies, like a gun shop bill that had broad unanimous or bipartisan support and passed out of the Senate committee it was sitting in unanimously, passed out of the House nearly unanimously, and this would make it so that gun shops would be trained on noticing the signs of suicidality and responding appropriately to that. And there also allows the gun shops to store firearms that have been voluntarily relinquished by individuals who feel like they're not in a space where they can properly secure those firearms on their own.
Well, it sounds like WAVE is more about safety and regulation. Does anyone ever accuse WAVE of being anti-gun?
Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of people have said over the years that WAVE and other similar gun violence prevention groups are in opposition to the Second Amendment, or that we want to see a world where there are no guns or no gun ownership in Wisconsin. We understand that Wisconsin is a state with a rich gun history of families that like to hunt and to have firearms for other reasons. And while the statistics show that gun use for self-defense is actually not useful, and that having a gun makes you more in danger of gun violence, we also recognize that there are other reasons why folks may want guns, and we're not trying to propose policies that take away all guns. We're trying to ensure that the right folks have access to guns and the wrong folks do not. And we're trying to ensure that if someone becomes a danger to themselves or to their community, that we can have policies in the books that will allow us to remove those firearms from those individuals.
All right, and at the core of our discussion today, we're talking about what can people do to become active. WAVE is out there doing their part with legislation and policy, but what can the citizen at home do from their armchair right now to help?
First and foremost, contact your legislators. Look up to see who the legislator is in your district. Send an email, call in, say that you support this policy or that policy. And if you want more information on those policies, I would encourage you to go to our website, waveedfund.org. We have listed there the bills that we're pushing for, the bills we're pushing against, what the bills would do. And then we have other calls to action where if you're interested in supporting a bill or opposing a bill, we have ways that we can support you in reaching out to your legislator and asking them to take certain steps. But beyond that, hold local community events raising awareness around this issue. Reach out to us or Moms Demand Action or other gun violence prevention groups and ask how you can get involved, as far as saying, in my small town, my community, we've had recent tragedies. We want to bring a light to this. How can we do that? And our organizations would be happy to assist with setting up a vigil or an educational event to discuss the need for safer gun policies.
Right. And it sounds like you're active in the community. You do everything, sounds like, from a town hall to a large auditorium if people are willing to listen.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're going to try to reach everyone where they're at. If that's here in Milwaukee of 600,000 people, or in some small town up north in the state of 100 people.
Right.
We're trying to spread our goodwill far and wide. We know that when people have a chance to learn about the policies we're pushing for and to kind of hear through the lies of the gun lobby, the vast majority of Wisconsinites support the policies we're pushing for, and they've been lied to in some cases by the gun lobby and by legislators and policymakers who are beholden to the gun lobby, and told that groups like WAVE are simply trying to take their guns when
Right.
That's just not the case.
Right. All right. Well, Nicholas, thank you for joining and adding value to our discussion today, and thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Thanks, my pleasure.
All right. Through this program, we hope to send a message that those lost to gun violence are never forgotten. To those who are watching, know that your voice is impactful and can bring, hopefully, change.